Good morning, March 20th, 2024. I want to talk a little bit today about step 3 in the CARPA process. Capturing, analyzing, revising, that's step 3, practicing, and then every day. And so step 3 is the revision step. And this is the step that we do after we have discovered those distorted cognitions in step 2, in the analytical step. So this is creating that revised version. And the key concept here is something that I refer to as mutual exclusivity. That simply means when two things are mutually exclusive, it's either or, but not both. And this becomes a very big deal when we think about and go about revising these distorted cognitions. Now, this concept comes courtesy of David Eagleman, one of my favorite authors, in his, I believe, his second book, Incognito. Don't quote me on that part, but it is Incognito. Now, David did not call this mutual exclusivity himself. He didn't use that term. That's my term for what he was describing. But basically, David was positing this idea that the human brain cannot house two mutually exclusive beliefs at the same time. And that just means either or, but not both, mutually exclusive. And actually, that makes a lot of sense when you think about it in the context of how the human brain functions. If we could, things would get screwed up in a big fat hurry if we could violate this law of mutual exclusivity. And we would have two opposing beliefs and we wouldn't know which one to choose. Now, as soon as I ran across this concept, the light bulb went off in my head. It was one of those really big aha moments. It answered so many questions for me, and it took away so much of the mystery. For example, how can we have the knowledge that exercise is so good for us and have this desire to do it so strongly, but we just can't seem to do it? We can't seem to make it a habit. Kind of a mystery to most people, but once you understand this concept, the answer is very simple. Let me explain it to you. Having the knowledge that exercise is good for us and the desire to want to do it are not, and I repeat, not mutually exclusive to the cognitions that actually keep us from exercising. Think about that for a minute. Let me say it again. The knowledge that exercise is good for us and the desire to do it, those cognitions are not mutually exclusive to the cognitions that actually keep us from exercising. So what cognitions am I talking about here that actually keep us from exercising? They are usually thoughts like, yeah, I'm too tired. I'm too sore. I just don't feel good. I don't feel right. I don't have the time right now. And that's usually followed by other cognitions like, I'll do it later when I have time, or I'll do it tomorrow when I feel better. Now you can insert your own thoughts here because there are many of them. At last count, I've counted close to 30 of these type of thoughts that I have, right? And I'm sure there's many more beyond that. But I think you know where I'm going with this. Here is the crux of the matter. I can believe that exercise is awesome and good for me, and I want it badly, while simultaneously having the belief that I'm too tired to do it right now. I can have those two cognitions at the same time because they are mutually inclusive, not mutually exclusive. So, if I am going to get about this business of exercising, I have to come up with a mutually exclusive belief to the belief that I'm too tired. How about something like this? How about something like, there is no such thing as being too tired to exercise. It just doesn't exist. In fact, exercise gives me energy because you see, either one of two conditions can be true. Either tiredness, that feeling of tiredness, can be a valid reason to exercise, or it can't. It is or it isn't. You get what I'm saying here? You can also begin to put other thoughts in there, like the one I just mentioned. When I'm tired, I'm going to gain energy. When I'm tired, that's the very best time to exercise because it doesn't take energy away. It gives me energy. Now, those are just a couple, but there are a host of ways in which we can create this new set of cognitions, this new narrative, really, that is mutually exclusive to the idea that tiredness is a valid reason to not do it. And of course, part of that narrative is making the same kind of revision for all the other cognitions or beliefs that prevent exercise from actually happening. Now, I refer affectionately to these cognitions, the ones that keep us from actually exercising, as simply intention-killing thoughts or cognitions. Because that's exactly what they do. They kill our best of intentions to exercise. Now, you've probably heard the term, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? I've modified that a bit. I've modified it to the road to status quo is paved with dead intentions. Intentions that have been killed by these intention-killing thoughts or cognitions. So it's the intention-killing thoughts. Those are the negative thoughts that have to be replaced with mutually exclusive intention-promoting thoughts. Let me say that again. Each intention-killing thought has to be revised and replaced with this revised version that is an intention-promoting thought that is mutually exclusive to the one it's replacing. Now, I'm applying this to exercise because I think it's just an easy one for most people to connect with, and most people can relate to that idea. But this idea of mutual exclusivity really is applied to just about every thought that is creating a problem. In fact, I would say every thought that creates a problem must be revised to and replaced with a mutually exclusive revision. Let's take something else, like one of the most popular or most used cognitive distortions, which is catastrophizing or playing out worst case scenarios. Now, most people have figured out that worst case scenarios are generally highly unlikely. And if you know anything about statistics, if you understand what a standard distribution is or a bell curve, you could pretty much prove that. In most cases, worst case scenarios are going to happen less than 15% of the time. Actually, worst case are probably going to be less than 5% of the time. Whereas most probable scenarios are going to fall within one standard deviation of the norm. And that's going to account for roughly 70% of outcomes. 68.4, something like that. We'll round it to 70 and we'll keep 15% as best case and 15% as worst case. Just an easy way to divide it up. Most probable outcomes are outcomes that are mutually exclusive to worst case scenarios. See, they're not exactly the opposite. We don't have to take the worst case and replace it with the best case because we've got all this vast selection of most probable scenarios that qualify as mutually exclusive to worst case. Now, the concept of creating these most probable revisions is super powerful. I think it's almost magical. So let me refer back to something I talked about in step 2, the analytical step. I was analyzing my own stream of consciousness, right? And I was in the state of anxiety. Anxiety I had created because I had pushed something a little bit too far, and I had actually made the problem worse. Now, it was in that scenario, and you can go back and listen, that I came across two thoughts. When I was doing the stream of consciousness exercise with that scenario, out came two thoughts that I kind of knew they were in my head, but I didn't realize just how negative they were. These were thoughts that had been with me probably pretty much my entire life, ever since I can remember. They're things my dad used to say to me about things I had done. You should have left well enough alone. You should have quit while you were ahead. He made these comments when I pushed something too far, tweaked it one crank too far and broke it, something like that. He would spit these out. And little did I know, but these thoughts had been playing in my subconscious mind for a long, long time. So whenever I made a mistake or screwed something up because I was trying to tweak it a little bit more, trying to make something work that maybe wouldn't work, these thoughts would ring in my head. And they would cause me all kinds of anxiety and negative thoughts about myself. I should have quit while I was ahead. I just should have left well enough alone. Now, once I realized the nature of those thoughts, I realized, whoa, wait a minute. Those absolutely need to be neutralized. Now, I could have just tried to make the conscious decision not to think those thoughts anymore, right? That's what most people do. But that wouldn't have worked out very well because that just doesn't help the situation. What I needed to do was I needed to come up with some thoughts that do work. Now, I've written a whole book about this. These conscious decisions to simply do something different don't work. And my book, which is actually on my website, and you can download it for free, it's a PDF, is titled Why Can't We Just Do It? And it explores this whole idea of why we can't simply make that decision. I couldn't simply make the decision to not think those thoughts anymore. The only way I'm going to expunge those thoughts from my mind, from my system, is to create these mutually exclusive counter thoughts. So now I went to work. I went to work with the revision part, which is what we're talking about here in step 3. And here were the different iterations of my revision. I started with the most obvious. I will never leave well enough alone, right? I went from leaving well enough alone, that's something I should do, to something I absolutely won't ever do. That's what I want to tell myself. And I back that up with a couple other ideas. I will always push the limit. I will always challenge status quo. The only way I'm ever going to find what my limitations are is pushing myself past them, right? And I'm going to accept that relatively small percentage of instances, which it is relatively small, in which doing so actually breaks something or ruins something. I will accept that. And I will relish in the relatively large percentage of times or instances when doing so makes an improvement. When doing so creates something that didn't exist before, or something that everybody else had concluded wouldn't work or couldn't be done. Those were my iterations. Now, the second of those thoughts, that was a little more cut and dried. The idea that you should quit while you're ahead. That I simply replaced with, I'll never quit, ever. Not when I'm behind, not when I'm ahead, or anything in between, because I will never quit. Success comes from never quitting ever, and always pushing the boundaries. Now, didn't take me very long. I do play around with that. I threw a lot of different thoughts out, and those are the ones that I settled in on. So that is my revised narrative, which is mutually exclusive to the thinking that had been embedded in the system for ages, right? For most of my life. Now the only thing I have left to do is to practice, which is the fourth step, which I talk extensively about in step 4, the practice piece. But I'll tell you here that this new narrative goes on tape. It went on tape. And to this day, it is still a part of my vision credo. Still something I listen to every day. So it was the practice piece at first. I would say now it's become the retainer. It retains these truths in my mind for a lifetime. I get to hear myself say these things, some version of these things every single day, along with a lot of other truths that I need to remind myself of. My vision credo on tape, listen to it every day. Now, all of the steps in this process, I think, are fairly challenging, but I find this third step to be particularly so. You have to understand the concept of mutual exclusivity and how to apply it, or you're going to be completely dead in the water. And left wondering, why can't I just do this? This concept was such a game changer for me. It solved one of the biggest mysteries, one that had haunted me for a long time. And so let me end this segment with this anecdote. When I mention cognitive therapy, CBT, to my clients, I often get this quip. Oh, right, yeah, that's that positive thinking stuff. Now, this really gives the sentiment that if you simply practice good thoughts, you're going to fix your negative thinking. And at one point, I honestly thought that was the case also. But thinking this way only leads to a mountain of disappointment and frustration. Sure, it is technically true that these new thoughts, these new revised thoughts that we're creating are, in fact, positive. No doubt about that. But no matter how positive a thought might be, if it's not mutually exclusive to the thought that it is replacing, or set of thoughts that are actually causing the problems, you're going to spend a lot of energy and get almost nowhere. A very low return on investment. So mutual exclusivity is really the linchpin of this revision process. Takes a bit of practice to get used to, but it is the mother lode. It is the bomb. It changes everything.